The number of employed persons in Australia rose 1,100 from a month earlier to 11.66 million in May, an unexpected rise. Andrew Salter of ANZ talks to Dukascopy TV about these figures. Hi Andrew, thanks very much for joining me. Which sector can we attribute this job growth to?
Well, the ABS doesn't provide data on an industry breakdown in every monthly survey. They happen to come in the quarterly release, which we didn't get this month. But they do provide data on a state breakdown, so we can see which states contributed to this growth. As it turns out, New South Wales was the biggest gainer, and given that New South Wales is reasonably concentrated in terms of manufacturing and services, we can probably extrapolate that the jobs were probably created in those industries. The states that really failed to create jobs this month were Queensland and Western Australia, both of which experienced negative jobs growth. So obviously those states are exposed to mining and mining-related services. So I don't think that's any surprise that with falling commodity prices, with the peak in mining investment, that those states are undergoing job shedding.
Economists have warned that this number is manipulated by an increase of casual and part-time work, meaning the unemployment rate, currently sitting at 5.5%, is higher than we think. What financial knock-on impact is this having on items such as domestic consumption?
Yeah, I wouldn't say manipulated. I think it's certainly true that casual and part-time job creation has been stronger in the Australian labour force over the past year compared to full-time employment. For example, in the year to May, 41,000 jobs were created in full-time employment, but 83,000 were created in part-time employment. I think that does tell you that the underlying labour market is a little bit soft because firms lack the confidence to put people on more permanent employment arrangements. But I think what you're actually getting at is that there's a high degree of labour underutilisation in the market at the moment. In other words, there's people who want to work longer hours but are unable to because their employers don't have that capacity to put them on longer hours. And actually, we did get in this release measures of the labour underutilisation rate, which is actually released quarterly as well, and that's been ticking up in excess of the general rise in the unemployment rate. So labour underutilisation is higher and rising faster than the labour unemployment rate. So that's consistent, I think, also with the idea that the labour market is underlyingly soft and that there's a very soft amount of labour demand out there. The question about domestic consumption is an interesting one. These employees that are being put on casual or part-time work, it's hard to know to what extent that's a desire, their desired outcome. The rise in the labour underutilisation rate is telling us that it's probably not completely desired. So that tells us that there is an amount of demand coming from workers to work for longer. So consumption is probably being a little bit held back by this, and certainly if you look at indicators like retail sales, motor vehicle sales, that's the sort of sign that we're getting. They're not completely falling away, but they're not posting consistently good outcomes either.
Job creation is currently averaging about 20,000 a month, a healthy figure, but not one which is going to see a significant fall in the unemployment rate. What measures do we need to see brought in to assist in business expansion and subsequently the creation of additional jobs?
I think to the extent that the forecast, the outlook for the unemployment rate is for a higher unemployment rate, a weaker labour market. And and at the same time that coincides with reasonably benign outlook for wages and prices, then I think what you're naturally led towards is that the economy can probably do with a bit more stimulus. We think that it's prudent for the government to return the budget to a surplus over an appropriate amount of time. So really what that means is that monetary policy is left to do the heavy lifting. We've got one more cut penciled in for this year, but we think that it's possible the risks are that we do get two. So I think monetary expansion will support things like residential investment. That will support things like investment in machinery and equipment, and that investment process in those sectors will lead to a rebalancing and growth away from the mining sector and towards the much bigger non-mining sector. And the associated impact will be to add jobs in that sector. So I think to answer the question, you probably should the weak growth in the labour market in employment growth does foreshadow easier monetary policy ahead.
The Aussie dollar gained in late morning trade on the release of the unemployment figures. NAB have downwardly revised their forecast for the Australian dollar as US tapering continues its hold over the currency. Would you agree, and what are your forecasts?
Yeah, well, ANZ's actually downgraded our forecast as well. We've pretty much moved. For a long time we held the view that the Australian dollar was going to remain above its fundamental level, but Fed tapering has changed that. It's changed that in a number of ways, and we've downgraded our forecasts at the same time. So we're now expecting 92 cents by the end of 2013. The reason US or the tapering of the large-scale asset purchases has reduced the outlook for the Australian dollar, or has caused the outlook to decline, is twofold, really. One, it actually creates a more buoyant US dollar, and obviously that just has a one-for-one impact on the Australian dollar. But also, the Australian dollar was above fair value for a long period of time because a number of investors around the world viewed it as a legitimate alternative investment currency. In particular, central banks and sovereign wealth funds, they diverted a lot of their reserves and their assets towards Australian dollars. We still have a great credit rating. We have a very high interest rate relative to the rest of the world. So we were a good investment destination for a long period of time. But with the US economy recovering and with the Federal Reserve System signaling that interest rates, they're thinking about unwinding the excessive amount or the very strong amount of monetary stimulus, that increases the return on capital, or that suggests the return on capital in the United States is going to be better in the future. And so the need to direct capital towards Australia has declined, and we're seeing that play out in capital flows. We're seeing money flow out of Australia and back into US dollars. So I think that's really what's going on. So it's a bit more subtle than just a tapering directly impacting the US dollar. It's also about entering the post-diversification era.
That's all from me for now. Goodbye.